Can imagine it's been a wild one for you guys.
A
little bit, yeah.
I can't see you guys anymore. I can only see the.
Yeah, I pulled that up. I'm just leaving it there so people find it. Come on in, everybody.
And I'm hollering. How appropriate.
You're hollering, yeah.
How appropriate.
You are. You sure were hollering in that thing. All right. Come on in, everybody. Welcome to another Tennessee Holler Hour. I am the founder of the Holler, Justin Canoe. We're at tnholler.com is where you can find us at the TN Holler. On Twitter and Facebook, we also have hollers all throughout the state, and that's all thanks to your support. So chip in a few bucks monthly if you can, and that's really what keeps us going and growing. Today we have a really special show. I hope you'll share this link. I hope you can help us get the word out about what's going on here, because it's a grave injustice that's going on in East Tennessee, Sullivan County. Everybody has by now heard of critical race theory, which has been made famous by all of these people who seem to think that it's in our schools when it isn't, don't really know what it is, want to basically ascribe everything they hate to it. And it has already claimed a victim here in Tennessee. So Coach Matthew HAWN is here with us. He's also joining us with KYLA JENEE Lacey, who wrote and performed an incredible spoken word poem that Coach HAWN shared that was a big part of why he is caught up in this. So hello to both of you.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hey, Justin.
Yes, we can see your comments, so comment along. I see Carlos, our resident troll, is already the first to join us, so feel free to chime in, Carlos. Coach, tell us, how are you feeling? And I want to hear that, but I also want you to take me back to, like, how surprised were you when this first started to happen?
Right now, I'm a little overwhelmed. This is a very, very new experience. Kyle and I have talked about it, and I was not expecting this at all. And so we're just trying to take it, one day at a time, and try and, kind of stay positive. I still expect to be teaching whenever the results come out in October, but up until that point, trying to stay near my friends and family, and but yeah, going back to how I felt when this happened, I was shocked. I could not believe it. I could absolutely not believe it.
So KYLA, first of all, I misspelled your name, so let me fix that.
Okay.
I'm just noticing that it's KYLA JENEE.
That's how I said it. I was like, Kyle.
You saw it. That's just a typo.
As long as you don't call me Kayla, I'm okay.
No. All right. Yeah. So KYLA, when did you hear that this furor was going on and that you were caught up in it? And did it take you by surprise?
Yeah, I was at a friend's house, and somebody had sent me the article on Instagram in June, and I was like really taken aback. I mean, I knew the poem had kind of already had legs of its own by that point. I mean, it was, just a thing, but it was definitely surprising that somebody had gotten fired over it. I was trying to get people fired up, not fired.
That's really well said. So, Coach, your hearings, watch some of it. We streamed a lot of it on the Holler, so people can feel free to go find the stream. It was 3 days of hearings over this firing. But what they seemed to focus on quite a bit was the profanity. Can you talk a little bit about that part of it? And, if you think that's really the issue here, or is it more about your, views of the world, so to speak? I'll call them progressive, even though you generally don't label them.
No, especially in class, I try not to label anything as conservative or liberal. I want my students to evaluate every claim independently from one another. And so, I've said this before, and, I felt like I was just introducing a powerful piece of art, like To Kill a Mockingbird. And her poem is a very powerful piece of art. And, I've seen it now. I don't know how many times. And, I get sucked into it, just it's such a great piece of work. And I don't know what they, how they are dealing with this, but, it's kind of hard to ignore the external political factors surrounding all this. So
I think that's fair to say, and watching the hearings, it seemed like they were talking about that there was no counterpoint to it. But as Kate Craig, who's in the area, said, is there really a conservative counterpoint to anti-racism? When you're talking about fighting against racism, KYLA, I want to ask you, like, what do you think about that? Should he be required to bring up a counterpoint when the issue you're dealing with seems to be so clearly good versus evil?
Well, a lot of times, like, the whole point of white privilege is like that whiteness is the default experience for a lot of people. And so when it's your default, you become desensitized to how prevalent it is. So the fact is that actually my poem was the counterpoint to so many things that were already being taught. And like I had mentioned at the hearing, not Ann Coulter, what is her name? Jeez, it escapes me, but Laura Ingraham had
same difference.
Yeah, I mean, but she had called it anti-racist propaganda. So I guess the opposite of anti-race, and that's their people. It's Fox News. But since it's anti-racism, the opposite of that, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I would gather it's racism.
Yes, that would seem to be. Coach, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. I teach in a 98 or 99% white school district. 75% of our county voted for Donald Trump. And so, what I try to do in my class is bring them different perspectives. And, she has a great perspective.
Well, and that was something that came up a lot in the hearings. I'm flashing a picture of the Inquisition that you just faced. What came up a lot was your students were asked via Zoom, A, if they share your viewpoints, and B, if they felt respected in class, and almost to a person. I didn't watch every single one, but even the ones that disagreed with you politically said they felt respected and that their viewpoint was given as much weight in class as the opposite. Is that something that you set out and tried to do?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know what my students' political viewpoints are. That's not something that I ask them. I've never graded a student on an idea that we discuss in class, their belief in an idea that we discuss in class. So, and, I keep my political views out of the conversation. I have such a good relationship with students that a lot of times after class, they will come up and say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And I'll say, "Well, okay, this is what I think." But in class, I'm just sort of a mediator or a moderator to the discussion that we're having.
That sounds like what a good teacher should be doing. And frankly, when I was watching this and hearing about the class, I was wishing that I could have taken the class when I was in school. That I wish I had a class like that. And I think a lot of the kids expressed that. They said, one was asked, how would you feel if you had him again? And she was like, it's great. And she wasn't even a liberal or Democrat or whatever they want to say. I want to do one thing here. First, I want to show the article that Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote that you shared, the first white president. And I think the issue with this, there was a lot of, obviously, we can understand people who support him may have an issue with that. But the point of the article was what, Coach?
Well, the point of the article was the reason why I assigned it was just to give these students a different perspective. We discussed before about the 2016 election, and my students are very bright. They said Russian interference. He's a good businessman. He's a good politician. And, and I'm a big fan of Ta-Nehisi Coates. I've followed his career for a while, and I think he's an important voice that, that we need to listen to, just like KYLA, and so what I wanted to do with the article was just to introduce those students to his perspective, and so we could discuss it. Unfortunately, we never got to do that.
Right. And KYLA, would I be embarrassing you if I played 1 minute of your, just so people know what we're talking about, played 1 minute of your poem?
I'm gonna tune it out.
You're gonna tune it out. You don't want to see it. All right, I won't play it, but I want people to go and find it.
I mean, you can play it. I just won't listen to
it's fascinating. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about the poem itself. When did you write it, and sort of what was the impetus for it?
I wrote it in 2014. And I wrote it when I do remember, it was a lot in terms of the writing process, but a part of it was written when I was in my head. I was driving down the road, and I live in Seminole County. Well, I live in Georgia and Florida, but I grew up in Seminole County, Florida, and I grew up about 20 minutes west of where Trayvon Martin was murdered. And so this was 2 years after the George Zimmerman trial. Like, I literally knew one of the witnesses of the trial. That's how intimate it was. And, just growing up, a lot of my experience in a predominantly white school was, I always say, like, a lot of the teachers didn't like the fact that their brightest student was their darkest student. And, just experiencing things in life where, people kind of, just second guessing me simply because of the way that I looked. And, just a lot of experiences of other people that I knew, it was just kind of a thing I never would have imagined, I would be here today. Like, it was just a poem that I felt passionately about the subject. And actually there is a woman that I went to high school with who I put all of my assets into the fact that she was a Trump supporter. She is a Trump supporter. And, a lot of the people that I went to school with don't think that because they are outwardly racist, that they have racist views or, right, potentially biased viewpoints. And so she said something happened, but I ended up writing a paragraph, and she was so offended. Well, a status, and she was so offended. And I was just like, a lot of the people I grew up with think that if you ignore racism, then it goes away. Like, if you ignore cancer, it goes away, I guess. But because they don't have to experience it, they don't know what it feels like. So those were kind of all of the things that were happening at the time that I wrote the poem. And I didn't even, perform it really until about 1.5 years later. So,
Coach, you've been doing this for a long time, and it seems like it's a challenging class, and it's intended to challenge the viewpoints of kids. Have you seen that work over time? And Sullivan County obviously is a predominantly white, to say the least, area. Are you presenting these viewpoints because they don't exist there?
I present these viewpoints, to sort of give these students different perspectives, and a perspective like KYLA's is something that we don't see around here a lot. And I try to do that with a lot of the materials that I give. One, to broaden their horizons, and two, just to help develop an understanding. But it's also something that I think they might be interested in, and that we could get a good discussion from. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that they've never heard of, but just as a tool of teaching. If I think the students are really going to sink their teeth into something, and we'll have a good class discussion, then absolutely. And just like that, just like her poem, which I think we're getting a lot of requests for you to play that.
I see that. Coach, this is a majority. So if you and I both vote to play it, I think we can do it.
But
well, it is hers.
It is hers.
How about this?
Here's play it.
I'm just gonna.
She just caved, so I'm gonna do
She
it.
can,
hang on. I'm only going to do 1 minute, and I have it queued up to.
All right, I'm going to say, am I going to be on camera while you do this? So I don't have
You
to.
are.
Okay, great.
You are.
So I have to be responsible and listen. Okay.
All right, here we go. It's really good though. I wouldn't set you up to fail.
Yeah, you can mute your computer.
We learned your French.
That's a good idea.
We learned your English. We learned your Spanish. We learned your Dutch, your Portuguese, your German. You learned our nothing. You called us stupid. That's white privilege. And I'm sure it probably hurts for you to hear those two words, kind of like gunshots and explosions from those commissioned to protect you with whisking past your ears. What is white privilege? It is the only 5 decades of legal acknowledgement expected to correct 400 years of white transgression. It's crack versus cocaine. Blacks receiving almost 20% longer sentences for the same exact offenses. So like, for instance, a black man without a record is less likely to get a job than a white felon, or maybe it's because we're lazy and we don't work hard enough. Like, what the fuck? 400 years in the same field literally is an incredible resume builder.
Okay, that's where I was going to stop it. I mean, it's just a machine gun spray of truth bombs. And, you know, everybody should watch the whole thing. It's called White Privilege. Search KYLA's name on YouTube and you'll find it. Coach, I'm going to X out of there so KYLA doesn't have to look at herself for the rest of the show.
I was fine with that part.
I mean, it's fire right there. And yes, there was some cursing. I'm told that you had a mute button in your hand for a lot of that. Do you feel like this is the real question I want to ask you? Do you feel like this would be happening if the anti-critical race theory furor was not going on in our country right now?
You know, I don't know that for a fact, but it really is hard to ignore. You know, I was dismissed the same day that bill, the anti-CRT bill, passed the Tennessee Senate. It passed the House a day or two prior. It was signed into law that week. So me being a contemporary issues teacher, and I am, aware, try to be as aware as I possibly can about what's happening in our state, in our region, in our world, in our country. I knew that bill was happening. And so, yeah, it's hard to ignore.
KYLA, I know how I feel about this. How do you feel about this?
I think Matt is taking a more diplomatic approach.
Yeah,
than
me
I
too.
would. And I also, I'm more intimately acquainted with some of the reactions to the poem over time, over the last few years. So I personally think that it was because of, it wasn't the language. I mean, if you look at their required reading, it wasn't the language. And I mean, it was not like it was middle schoolers or elementary kids. It was high schoolers. And if you think high schoolers haven't heard every one of those words and don't say them on a regular basis, then you are completely delusional or intellectually dishonest.
Right. It definitely seemed to me, just the timing of this can't be written off as a coincidence. And, I'm not going to call it a conspiracy or anything like that, but it just seems too difficult to write that off. You can't write that off, the timing of it. Coach, where are things now? I know you just had the hearing. Where are things now? Is there anything anybody can do to help here? Is there anybody, we like to say, we ask people to holler at people. Is there anybody they should be hollering about it, or should they leave everybody alone?
So where we are now, we are waiting on the hearing officer to make a decision, and that decision will happen around October 10th or 11th. And, but I'm currently unemployed. I mean, I'm suspended without pay. My sister and my friends started my sisters and my friends started a GoFundMe. So if people want to help, they can share this story too, share my story, and hopefully, other teachers won't have to go through this.
Well, that right there, KYLA, seems to be the whole point of this. It's the chilling effect that it will hopefully, from their perspective, have on other teachers who dare to share a KYLA JENEE Laceey poem or a Ta-Nehisi Coates article, or, you know, tell the truth about our history. And so that's critical race theory ban, they quote unquote, that was passed here. It doesn't even mention critical race theory. And if you look one by one through the items in it, you could sort of say, okay, it's not that big a deal. But the overall point of these laws and this conversation is that chilling effect. Would you agree with that, KYLA?
Well, you know what? So when everything went down, one of the first things, I think the very first conversation Matt and I had was, he told me like he didn't know, you know, like his version of how history was taught, of how the Civil War was taught, was it was taught as I think he said, a noble cause.
The law,
so,
yeah.
You know, I mean, I went to school in Florida, which is kind of a, you know, interesting Southern state, but we didn't learn that, you know, so it was just kind of interesting to see the perspective of history being taught as if having slaves was some sort of benevolence, you know, some sort of act of benevolence,
right.
You know, and being the descendant of slaves and having that be the experience that I live as, like, that's totally wild to even, you know, just hear that that is how somebody was taught.
How does that ring to you in terms of other teachers and the way things are taught in Sullivan County? Is that something that you feel like needs to be guarded against, is the way history is taught in Tennessee, Coach?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, I believe, you know, I wasn't at the June 8th meeting, but I believe Dr. Cox said, you know, you can teach white privilege. Well, under this new law or new bill, you can't teach that anymore. And, you know, I think we need to incorporate more people like KYLA and Ta-Nehisi Coates into our curriculum. Absolutely.
You were quoted as saying that white privilege is as much a fact as the Pythagorean theorem, which I thought was a really good line, something that I completely agree with. But it's one that, you know, people have a hard time hearing that, KYLA. Like, these white people, especially the ones we live among here in Tennessee, they don't want to hear that white privilege. And a big part of that is because, you know, not all of them are wealthy. You know, they've faced struggles. So they feel like what they're hearing is, oh, because I'm white, I must be rich. But it's not just about that, right? It's about other parts of the human experience that they don't really seem to want to acknowledge.
It's about the fact that your whiteness is not the reason why you're poor. You know, there are other factors, there's class, but your race does not assist you in making, or I should say, to take away from opportunities for you. So the thing about privilege, like I always say, everybody wants privilege. Everybody wants privilege. Luxury brands are the reason why, you know, privilege is the reason why luxury brands exist. But just because, you know, you have privilege doesn't make you a bad person. I have privilege. You know, there are many people who have privilege, but it doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't take away from any experience that you have. But to just completely not acknowledge its realness it doesn't make sense. I mean, this literally 400 years of white existence being the default, being the go-to, being, you know, we have to assimilate in terms of we have to know about white culture. White culture doesn't have to know about us.
Right. That's really well said. Well, I appreciate you guys doing this. I wanted to give you guys some final thoughts here, but I just want people to see, you know, this is a real thing. Marsha Blackburn's obviously making hay with critical race theory, the critical race theory law, you know, and it's not in our schools. I said that in a school board meeting this week that went viral and was on like Good Morning America and stuff. But like, people need to hear that critical race theory is not in our schools.
It's not,
you know, they're now attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion, which should be in our schools and is not critical race theory. So a lot of things are getting jumbled up. Matthew, just like, as we let you go here, how are you feeling? And, you know, like, where are you hoping that this goes next? And, you know, what do you have to say to maybe some of the people who are watching this and like watching it think maybe not on your side?
Well, you know, I would just ask that they trust teachers to do the right thing. You know, I have a long career of impacting students and being fair to students, and just let us do our job. Like, we know what we're doing, and where we're going to go after this, there are a lot of people reaching out to talk to KYLA and me, and I'm thankful for that opportunity. I've got a new friend in KYLA Jenee Lacey, so that's pretty cool. And I still keeping in contact with Jenny McCoy, my lawyer, and my Uniserve rep, Harry Farthing, and the TEA has been wonderful. My teachers union, I got a shout out to them. They were absolutely fantastic and supportive. And so we're hopefully going to raise awareness through this. And, hopefully, one of the things I've said is, look, I have a very, very good support system, an excellent support system, but this still isn't fun. This is still not somewhere that I thought I would be. And, if going out and talking about these things and showing people that, hey, teachers, we're decent people, we're good people, we love your kids, we love your students, let us do our job, then hopefully another teacher won't have this happen to them.
Just before I ask KYLA for your final thoughts, Coach, are you planning on staying in Sullivan County? Is there any thought to go teach somewhere else?
I plan on being back October 12th. That's my plan right now. I love Northeast Tennessee. I love Sullivan County. I'm a product of Sullivan County schools. But there is a very real possibility that may not happen, and I'm aware of that, and that it's scary. So
KYLA, there's a couple people making this decision right now. If you could say something to them, what would it be?
Well, one of the things that I really thought about when I was sitting there defending my work of art called White Privilege in front of a bunch of old white men, how meta that was, right? Like the irony. And then not only that, I was sworn to tell the truth about why not telling the truth is important. So I just kind of thought those things were really interesting. You have to think, if people learn about your truth and they don't like it, what does that say about your truth? This continuous attempt to cover up a pretty sordid past does not, the past doesn't go away simply because you wrote it out of history books. Like, it doesn't make it not happen. And I guess there's some attempt to, make a void or completely cover up things and say, because whenever there's a conversation, it's, these conversations, stoke division. Have you looked around? You know what I'm saying? Like, you never solve problems by pretending they don't exist.
Absolutely. And that's something that I hope our legislators hear, the ones who refuse to move that KKK Grand Wizard bust out of our capital for so long, the ones like Rep. Mike Sparks, who refuses to acknowledge that the Civil War was even fought over slavery, the ones like Justin Lafferty, who treated the 3/5 compromise like a positive. These are all people that need to hear uncomfortable truths, and not talking about them doesn't make them get better. KYLA, if you have something else to say.
I would absolutely love somebody like Justin Lafferty to tell me I'm 3/5 of a person to my face.
Yeah, I don't think he would do that.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem like somebody who wants to say much of anything to anyone's face. I'm up there bothering him quite a bit. And if he's watching,
well, you tell him I said that.
I will. Thank you guys so much for doing this. I hope that you're go on all the shows together. Coach, I'm sorry this is happening to you. I hope it has a happy ending. It should have a happy ending. If those people that are making that decision were actually listening to the students that were talking about this in the hearings, who this should be about, then they will do the right thing, exonerate you, and get you back in a classroom sooner rather than later. Coach, thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Justin. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. And KYLA, everybody go watch KYLA's poetry, and I'm sure there's more of it out there that I just haven't seen yet.
It's on WAN Poetry, WAN Poetry, YouTube. That's actually the YouTube channel, but shout out to them. Shout out to my great friend Amir, who's ahead of that and does all the filming. So
Fantastic. And she's at KYLA_Lacey on Twitter. I don't think Coach is on there.
Not much. No.
You have an account though?
I do, but I don't.
No,
we won't even talk about it. All right.
It's not even worth it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys so much for doing this.
Yeah, my Twitter is more, but
yeah, no, get on there, follow her. I just followed
her Twitter
you today.
Is great. Yeah,
we're on
great.
that, and we're at the TN Holler. So I appreciate you both. Looking forward to it. Stay in touch and come back soon. Okay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. Yeah,
for sure. Thanks for what you're doing.
All
right. So that's Coach HAWN and KYLA. I'm just staying on because I see our buddy Carlos saying all kinds of stuff, and I always like to address him at the end, and I don't want to put KYLA and Coach through that. Carlos, first of all, this Dr. Fiscus stuff, you know, I know you know me well enough to trust me on this. Trust me on this. Don't just swallow that story that she sent that to herself, the muzzle to herself. Just trust me on this. These people are capable of anything. Look what they're doing to Coach HAWN. They're all railroading him. And if you're swallowing their story, you're falling right into their trap. So you cannot like Dr. Fiscus, but swallowing that story about her sending herself the muzzle, be better than that. Just to bring it back to what we were here to talk about, Coach HAWN, really appreciate what he's going through. This anti-CRT stuff has just been really ugly to watch throughout the country, but especially here in Tennessee. I mentioned a few people, Rep Mike Sparks, who, you know, I bother him all the time about what the Civil War was fought over. He won't even acknowledge it was fought over slavery. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to make teachers uncomfortable for teaching the real truth. There's this like movement that's been going on since the Civil War to, you know, there are names for it that's escaping me right now. Write the comment, but it's the lost cause. That's what it is. The lost cause of the Confederacy. And they want to essentially rewrite history to tell us that it was really about states' rights. And, you know, it was really about all kinds of things that, as KYLA said, that the, that, you know, slavery was just, you know, how it was back then. And there was actually, you know, they were taken care of and had 3 hot meals, all that, frankly, bullshit. And so when somebody comes and challenges their worldview and shows kids Ta-Nehisi Coates' articles or, you know, a poem like the one you just saw, which you should go watch the whole thing, that gets their back up. They don't want to hear that. And they need to hear that. That's, I think, the biggest takeaway here. It's the people that are most offended that most need to hear this stuff. And so right now, Coach is on the front lines of this fight. You know, it's a fight that we're seeing all throughout the country. It's a fight that, you know, it's a part of the same fight that when I stood in the school board this week and talked about critical race theory and wearing masks and disinformation and Governor Lee, like, we're all part of this fight. And I hope that's what you take away from watching these broadcasts and following the hollers, that you're on the front lines too. We need you to go and speak up at school boards, speak up at city council meetings, speak up at county commission meetings, and be a part of this fight, because, you know, this is all part of the same thing. And Coach just happens to be bearing the brunt of it right now. But this is all part of the same thing. This is all a battle for hearts and minds. And everybody is in it, no matter whether you want to be or not, you're in it. And so that includes not just going and speaking, but it includes conversations you have with the people around you. It includes your Facebook groups. It includes your family. You know, we all need to speak up and have these conversations. And inch by inch, we're going to make this place a better place, a more inclusive place, a more tolerant place. And Coach HAWN teaching these kids in Sullivan County about this stuff is a really important thing for him to be doing. And it doesn't make it political, but it does make it right. And so I appreciate what he's doing. I appreciate you guys all following us. Carlos, thank you for reminding me. Look, Carlos, no mention of the terrible floods. Thank you for reminding me about the Humphreys County floods. It's not what we came here to talk about in this moment, but it is an important thing to bring up. Humphreys County is going through something terrible. You know, dozens of people were killed in the floods. It was a part of the district that I ran for Congress in. I spent a lot of time in Waverly. I've stayed at Loretta Lynn's ranch. Her foreman, Wayne, was actually one of the people killed. So please go donate to Coach HAWN's GoFundMe, but also to the Humphreys. Actually, more importantly, the Humphreys flood people. But then, yes, to Coach also. But yes, that's something that we're all going through right now, and it's really important to mention. So Carlos, thank you for that. Thank you for watching, even though you disagree with us. And thank you to everybody. Keep following all the hollers, and we'll see you soon.